Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans and you're watching the John Cedars channel from the bunker, and in this video I'm afraid we must yet again talk about the coronavirus outbreak, because there has been more reaction from Watchtower. Viewers of my channel will be familiar with two videos I've already done on this subject. In fact, three if you count the one I did about the final parts of the last days and the overall reaction of some Jehovah's Witnesses, and even you could argue some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, to interpret current events as the final part of the last days. Since doing those videos, there has been more material put out by Watchtower in the form of a morning worship video by John Ekron. Now, usually morning worship videos are put up on jw.org months or even years after they were originally produced. So you would have a governing body member or a governing body helper do a morning worship, and then maybe a year or so later, finally, the video would find its way onto jw.org. Not so with John Ekron's morning worship, which we've figured out must have been recorded on Thursday, March the 12th, when the coronavirus outbreak was very much in the news. And it's interesting to see how he uses the coronavirus outbreak as a reason to emphasize the need for Jehovah's Witnesses to be obedient to the organization. Anyway, in case you're interested, here is the day's text that he was commenting on Thursday, March 12th. The scripture there, Romans 12 verse 2, stop being molded by this system of things. I just want to bring to your attention part of the wording from that day's text, because in my view it's quite disingenuous and doesn't really reflect what being a Jehovah's Witness is all about. It says, "We can be assured, however, that bringing our thinking into harmony with Jehovah's does not mean giving up individual thought or expression. As stated at 2 Corinthians 3 verse 17, where the Spirit of Jehovah is, there is freedom. We are free to develop our own distinct personalities. We can have our personal preferences and choose our fields of interest. Indeed, Jehovah designed us to do so. However, we cannot use our freedom without restraint. When it comes to issues of right and wrong, Jehovah wants us to be guided by his thinking as revealed in his word." And that's really the point, viewers, that Watchtower goes above and beyond when it comes to deciding what is right and wrong, to the extent where it does infringe on personal freedoms and even personal thoughts. And to highlight this, I think it's worth bringing to your attention again this wording from the 2013 Watchtower. All of this will be relevant, by the way, to John Ekron's morning worship when I show you the clips. Check out this wording from the 2013 Watchtower, November 15th, page 20. "At that time, the life-saving direction that we receive from Jehovah's organization may not appear practical from a human standpoint. All of us must be ready to obey any instructions we may receive, whether these appear sound from a strategic or human standpoint or not." Compare that wording, that very absolute black and white, you must do what we say, irrespective of whether it makes sense. Compare that wording with what we just read in the day's text under consideration by John Ekron. "We can be assured, however, that bringing our thinking into harmony with Jehovah's does not mean giving up all individual thought or expression." I would argue based on what we've just read from the 2013 Watchtower, that's exactly what it means. You are not allowed your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own human standpoint if it contradicts the instructions received by Watchtower. And in that context, let's now consider what John Eckren has to say on the issue of obedience as it relates to current events. I should just explain that he's again basing his comments on Romans chapter 12, verse 2, where it says, stop being molded by this system of things. He works into his speech. You can watch the whole thing on jw.org. He works into his speech a scripture from Isaiah about Jehovah being the great potter, and we all need to be like clay. We need to be malleable in Jehovah's hands. So that's just to give you some context as to his next comments.
Now, imagine clay that you go to shape and mold it, and it says, ow, hey, don't do that. Hey, I don't want to look like that. Don't change me like that. Okay. What kind of reaction are we having when Jehovah's trying to shape and mold us? Well, let's consider two clay-like qualities that we can have when Jehovah is trying to shape and mold us. First of all, obedience. Now, it's clear to all of us that Jehovah is shaping and molding and preparing us for the end of this system of things and the events that are leading directly up to the Great Tribulation. So, will we be obedient when we get direction? How to preach, how to do our meetings, what assignment we may have during that turbulent time. You know, yesterday, Brother Splain made some excellent comments about King Solomon. Now, King Solomon had some divine instruction, but he ignored it. And he basically said, well, you know, I can marry lots of foreign wives and it's not going to have any effect on me. We don't want to have that kind of attitude when it comes to divine instruction. Or we could be like an athlete who hires a coach, pays him lots of money, and says, what can I do to be better? And the athlete says, well, you know, I'm the professional athlete. I really don't need to listen to what you have to say. So Jehovah is giving us counsel and advice. We want to listen. For example, this virus that is spreading around is giving us an opportunity to see about being obedient. We have many rules or guidelines that are being set for us. We may be quarantined. We may have trips and other things canceled. We may be told to wash our hands, to not shake hands, but elbow bump. Now, of course, we can try hard to be obedient to those rules and guidelines, but we also have an opportunity to not be just obedient to rules and guidelines, but be obedient to the principles behind them. And in this case, often the principle is love of neighbor. We're trying to look out for others with these rules and guidelines when it comes to the virus.
I'm all for love of neighbor, but that principle is not best advocated by a group of people that is craving the imminent destruction of all of their neighbors, if they don't adopt their religious views. It cannot be said that Jehovah's Witnesses are a neighbor-oriented religion, a religion that looks upon neighbors, on non-believers, with genuine love and genuine care, when they are praying for a day to come imminently, when all who don't share their views will be slaughtered. That's the first thing I want to say. Second of all, bearing in mind the material I showed you earlier about obedience and the extent to which people should be obedient, I find this rhetoric frankly chilling. If your message is going to be heed the instructions of the authorities, and there's a little bit of that there, fine. Of course we should be heeding the instructions of the authorities, who will be informed by what scientists and doctors have to say about how best to combat this virus and how best to keep quite frankly, the death toll as low as possible. But when these words are being spoken by a representative of an organization like Jehovah's Witnesses, for me, it takes on a chilling tone. All of a sudden, it's not merely about thinking about our neighbors, heeding the instructions of the authorities. The message amounts to, look at this doomsday situation we find ourselves in. Isn't this a perfect opportunity for us to show our obedience? And if there is one entity that Jehovah's Witnesses are to be obedient to above all else, it's Jehovah's organization headed by the governing body.
And really, when you think about it, any of the opportunities we have now, it's a time to practice being obedient. It really view it as training for us. We have an opportunity to practice being obedient for the future. It's at times like this that we can set a pattern of obedience, because with time and effort and practice, we can make obedience our first reaction rather than a second reaction. Well, what's another clay-like quality that we could have is spiritual focus. Today, Jehovah is making it perfectly clear that we're living in the last days. Now, the people of Noah's time, they took no note of the time they were living in. They didn't have that clay-like quality, and they were swept away. I saw a video recently of an athlete doing a track meet. They were running a race around a track. And this one athlete, when he crossed the finish line, he throws his hands up, and he was absolutely jubilant that he had won the race. But then he didn't see anybody cheering for him, and the rest of the runners were running. He was too early. It was one more lap to go. Well, he lost track of where he was. He didn't know that wasn't the last lap. Well, we don't want to lose track of where we are in the race for life, being so busy with doing other things. Let the fact that we're living in the last of the last days influence our day-to-day decisions, become clay-like, moldable, that we're living in the last days. Pay attention to the Bible principles that are mentioned to us in the Watchtower and our meetings, and have good spiritual conversations, and those conversations can help to remind us of the time in which we're living. So the lesson for us is, you have chosen Jehovah to be your potter. So be good, obedient, spiritually focused clay in his hands. Yes, we need to be like a rock in Satan's hands, and we need to be like clay in Jehovah's hands.
So I've already been fairly generous, some would say too generous, in my commentary on the response of Watchtower and the governing body to the coronavirus outbreak. My attitude is that it's certainly less than ideal, and I can certainly imagine it being much better and much more responsible, but I can also imagine it being much, much worse. And when I, quote unquote, praise the fact that witnesses are being told to defer to Caesar, essentially, and stay at home if that's what the government is ordering, I'm expressing relief as someone whose in-laws are believing Jehovah's Witnesses and who are, you could say, prime targets for this virus. So I'm glad to know that they're going to be okay, because the local rules where we are to stay at home, are to self-isolate. So they're going to survive, hopefully. I'm speaking from a position of, let's save as many lives as possible and worry about criticizing the organization where they deserve legitimate criticism later. But that does not let the organization off the hook when it comes to fear-mongering in times of crisis and exploitation in times of crisis. And we see both of those things in this video, which again was recorded. I mean, today is the 26th of March, so this was recorded 14 days ago. They have got this up very quickly compared to their usual turnaround when it comes to producing videos. So clearly they are very proud of what John Ekron has said here, but what he has said amounts to, first of all, use the coronavirus as an opportunity to learn to be obedient. And again, we know what obedience means in a Jehovah's Witness context. It means obeying the organization even if they tell you to do something that doesn't make any sense. And the second thing we hear, again in the context of the coronavirus, which he's just been talking about, John Ekron drooling over the fact that apparently we're in the final part of the last days. Well, I'm going to enjoy using that footage in the future, just as I'm going to enjoy using similar wording by Stephen Lett. It's not going to age well, and frankly, Jehovah's Witnesses in the future, decades perhaps in the future, might find themselves in hot water just by playing those clips, because it's going to be so embarrassing for Watchtower to see their past leaders jumping up and down over a pandemic, saying that it's the end of the world, and that clearly didn't come about. So by all means, John Ekron, by all means, Stephen Lett, jump up and down to your heart's content. I quite enjoy you doing that, but that doesn't excuse the fact that what you're doing is fear-mongering. You are capitalizing on a crisis that is taking thousands of lives, and you are using it to terrify people into following your organization. And even though, again, I am grateful that on the whole, the response to this pandemic is not nearly as bad as it could have been, again, that doesn't let the organization off the hook when it comes to the clearly exploitative response that they are demonstrating at such a grave time as this. So those were my thoughts on the footage we've just seen. Let me know what you think in the comments below. You will have noticed that the channel is somewhat swamped at the moment with coronavirus lockdown live stream videos. I do apologize for those who don't like that sort of thing. It's just that I figure at a time such as this, if I can do anything to provide people with a little bit of comfort and a little bit of levity, and I'm in a position to do that, maybe that's something that I should do. So if you're not down with that sort of thing, just skip those videos. I will be continuing these regular uploads, and the next one I'm working on is my rebuttal to the March JW Broadcasting episode, which was hosted by Mark Sanderson. So look out for that. But that's everything I have for you. All that remains is to tell all of you to please stay safe, stay inside, look after yourselves, and above all, stay positive. Yes, these are unusual times, these are troubling times, but it really isn't the end of the world, despite what doomsday fearmongers like Watchtower leaders would have you believe. That's all I've got for you. Don't forget to subscribe to the John Cedars channel for more such videos, and as always, thank you for watching.